Hello and welcome to a review that's a long ways coming. Uh, we're gonna review Oathbringer today. I finished this book like a month ago. I've had a really hard time putting my thoughts into words on this one. I've tried to record this video a couple times. Uh, this book is probably the most torn that I've been on Stormlight since I started reading it a couple months ago. I absolutely loved, I've got the other books right here. I absolutely loved Words of Radiance. It was probably my favorite so far. And The Way of Kings is really good. This is a great book. So, coming off Way of Kings, going into Words of Radiance, I was very excited for Oathbringer. And I don't want you to think that I don't like Oathbringer as we move into it, because I do still like Oathbringer. But it's probably the most torn I've been in a long time. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you what I mean here. If you look at the side of the book, you can see where I have gone back and reread sections. And it's very clear which pages I have reread. And if you have read this book before, you can probably guess which sections I've reread because I'm so incredibly torn on this book. I think, for a non spoiler description of why I'm torn, I think this book has some of the best moments in the series and also drags terribly in places. And I really like this book series, which is why I hate how I feel about this book, and it's why I've had to re-record this a couple times. But Oathbringer is such a fun ride, like 90% of the time. 90% of the time, this book is hitting on all fronts. The characters are great. The setting is still incredible, and the new introductions to it are even better. Everything going on with, I almost said character names, this is the non-spoiler section. Everything going on with the tower and everything there has only gotten better. Reveal after reveal after reveal of the world building that is incredible. Stuff that I'm just sitting there going, wow, really? I gotta read that over again, you know? It is great 90% of the time. 10% of the time, it's my least favorite book in the series. 10% of the time, it drags terribly. And 10% of the time, there's just conversations that I don't understand why they're happening. Conversations that don't make sense, or conversations we don't get to see that we needed to see to understand character motivation. Conversations that absolutely should not have been relegated to, oh yeah, well that happened. That's a very important conversation. And I can't say much more without spoiling things. So I'm going to instead just say it's still a good book. I still like it a lot. I still really enjoyed reading it. I'm just very torn on it. But I'm excited to start Rhythm of War. I haven't started it yet because I wanted to review this first. Uh, Edge Dancer leading into this was really good. I still need to read Dawn Shard so that I can read Rhythm of War, but I had to get this out of the way. I could not consume any more information about these characters before where I'm at right here so that I could record it. I still really like this book, but I'm gonna get into now why the things I don't like and the things that I do. I guess we're gonna break down in this review. Uh, I don't have a script. I tried to write one up. I hated it, so I don't have a script here. This is very off the cuff, very rambly review, as you might say. But this book, when it hits everything with spoilers on now. Spoilers on. If you don't want to be spoiled for this book, turn this video off and go read it for yourself. You know that I'm torn. Read this book. Spoilers on. Everything in Shadesmar is so cool. The stuff going on there, the everything when you have the cities there and the sprint there, that stuff is so good. The stuff in the tower is top notch. The politics of this book, where you have Taravangian and the way that he's trying to play around Dalinar, while you have Finn and everybody else is in there as they move forward. You have the Azish and everything going on with them. The politics are great. I love the way that Yanagon, the way that Gox and Dalinar slowly open up. Or I guess Dalinar was always open up to him, but the way that Gox slowly opens up to Dalinar and starts to trust him, just for Taravangian to try and rip it all away right at the moment they didn't need it to be ripped away. It's so good. The politics of this book are great. I love everything about the end of what happens in Kholinar. I don't love everything about what happens in Kholinar and how long it takes to get through the stuff in Kholinar. And I'm going to get into that too, because one of my biggest issues with this book is Kolinar. I think that where the characters go are really good. And I guess it'd be easier to tackle this character by character than it would to try and tackle it plot by plot or storyline by storyline, because they do converge a lot. I love what happens with Kaladin's character in this, where Kaladin is forced to choose between protecting people and hurting people. And the problem he has is that he knows people on both sides. He feels like his promise, his vow, was to protect those who could not protect themselves. But those people that could not protect themselves are fighting each other. And how does he choose? And he can't. And because he can't choose, he loses all of them, including Elokar. And it's such a powerful moment. I literally screamed no out loud. That's how much it hit me when Moesh killed Elokar. Because Elokar was about to say the words. It's very, very good. It's a great moment. And it's all built on the fact that Kaladin froze. That he froze up, that he couldn't do it. And seeing Adolin try to pull him out of that when they get into Shadesmar, and Kaladin just not knowing how to recover from it, and even still kind of never did, but he just had to keep moving forward anyway. It's just so impressive to see a character that you've seen come from the point of absolute despair of this is the end, I'm going to do the thing that I can't say for YouTube's sake, to then becoming this great hero almost, fighting off Seth and doing all this great stuff. And then here he's brought to that point again. And he chooses again to keep getting up and keep moving forward. And I love Kaladin in this book. He's so good. I love Adolin in this book. Adolin trying to live with what he did to Sadeas, trying to figure out how he should tell his father, if he should tell his father, should he tell Shallan, trying to figure out what's going on with the spirit of his sword and what's happening there and everything that comes from there, where he's finally able to, you know, fight back again. It's really, really good. Up until it's not. And I think Brandon Sanderson's an incredible writer. I think there wasn't enough time at the end of this book. I think this book needed to be another 40, maybe 50, maybe even 90 pages to be able to fill everything else out. But the fact that, Father, I killed Sadeas, and then what? Oh, well, we're just going to move on because we don't have time to talk about it. Right at the end of the book. Oh, I hate it so much. I get why Dalinar would be like, okay, I mean, you shouldn't have done it, but okay. But there's got to be more there. You can't build that up for an entire book and then just throw it away right at the end because you need to move past it. It bothers me so much. Speaking of Dalinar, let's talk about Dalinar, because I think that Dalinar is possibly still the most interesting character in this book. Dalinar's the best character in Words of Radiance, hands down, 100%. And Dalinar only gets better in Oathbringer. Dalinar, this book, where you get his backstory broke me. It broke him. And Dalinar having to ask himself, how do I keep going after what I did to her with Evie? It just, oh, that's a great story. And the fact that he's able to get up, not for himself, because, you know, he could give up if it was just him. Not for Navani, even though he loves her, but because he has to keep going. He can't stop. If he stops, everybody dies. So he gets up. His interactions with Odium in this book, his interactions with the Thrill in this book, they're all incredible. I love what they did with him in this book. Except, again, that moment with Adolin. That's the only moment that just really drives me up a wall, is that moment of, well, you shouldn't have done it, but we have bigger things to worry about right now. Because I haven't started Rhythm of War yet, but I guarantee you that's not a big plot thread anymore because they moved past it here. It's going to be just a throwaway line at this point, and it bothers me so much. Since we're talking about things that bother me so much, let's talk about Shallan. It's well recorded in this series of reviews on this channel that I don't love Shallan. I don't hate Shallan, though, despite what it may sound like. I think that Shallan is fine. I just don't necessarily like her. I think this book did wonders for how I feel about Shallan, and then also hurt me even more about how I feel about Shallan. And I'll get into why. The moment that I realized that Shallan was not the lead of the personalities, that she's just another personality and that she's fighting to try and determine which one is which, that's really interesting from a character perspective. That's such an interesting way to tell a story of a character that thinks they're one person, but also adopts these other personalities and kind of doesn't know who they really are because they've spent so much time as other people. I think that's really cool. I think the fact that Shallan tries to tackle it little bits at a time and fails miserably, I think that's really solid because you can't just unpack something that large bit by bit and expect to understand what's going on. Where it breaks for me is when Wit comes to her, and because she's fallen apart, and it's a really powerful moment. She's fallen apart because she wasn't able to help this kid. She got this kid killed, basically. It's a really strong moment. And Wit is just like, nah, it's fine, Shallan. I mean, yeah, the kid died, but it's fine because, you've gone through a lot. And the reason why it bothers me, that just knocked over my headphones because I'm moving so much because I'm worked up. The reason why it bothers me is not that Shallan has gone through a lot, because she has. She absolutely has. She lost basically her entire family, and it's not until the end of the book when she finally remembers they exist to ask about them when they're introduced to her. When she marries Adel, it all moves so fast at the end of the book. I'll get to that. I'll get to that. It's the fact that Wit is basically like, hey, nobody suffered as much as you. And it's like, not true though, because you can't gauge suffering like that. That's not how it works. When you have suffering, suffering is individual to the person. Everybody suffers differently. And so you have like Kaladin went to the brink of ready to do the thing I can't say because of YouTube. Dalinar murdered his own wife. And to have both of those things happen in this book, basically, of Kaladin like driven back to the point of despair, and Dalinar have to remember what he did, for Wit to look at Shallan and go, "You suffered so much." And it's like, yes, she has, but she's not the only one. And that's all it would have taken for that moment to hit for me, is for Wit to go, "But so has everybody else." And then Shallan could have been like, "Of course, I'm down in the dumps about what I did, but I'm with Kaladin, Adolin, who lost his mother, and I work for Dalinar, and I have Yesna, and I lost Yesna not that long ago, And so it's you would have had these incredible realizations that could have happened for her, but instead, because Wit goes, "You've suffered a lot," she's just like, "Well, yeah, I have." It bothers me so much because it was so close to a scene that I wanted to see and I didn't get. And I understand, again, it worked. It pulled Shallan out of it, but it just really bothered me. Man, I want to talk about Kholinar. Why does Kholinar bother me so much? It's not just because of that moment. Kholinar is set up for a good chunk of this book to be like the big mission, right? And it's important. It very much is. But it takes so long once they get to Kholinar. It really takes a while. The book drags a lot trying to get through the stuff in Kholinar, where they have to go to parties and they have to meet the tailor and they have to steal food and find out what's going on there. And I get it. Again, everything builds up. It's a slow burn into this big moment. And you have the climax of Kholinar, which is where everybody gets sent to Shadesmar, and they have to deal with that. And they don't get back until the end, basically, because that's where they're needed. But it just feels like it's this slow burn into this big chaotic moment, and then, no, we're done. Kholinar's gone. Don't worry about it. It fell. Don't worry about it anymore. Elokar's dead. And it's like, okay, but what did we do that slow burn for so long for if you were just going to pull the Band-Aid off? Like, give me some time in Kholinar during the fight. Give me some time to understand what's happening. Give me some time to know that everybody's okay. Now, granted, by the end of the book, you get that moment where Scar, Drahi, and Gavinor are okay, and that's great. But the question in my mind immediately when they teleported was, okay, but what about Scar, Drahi, and Gavinor? And you get that at the end of the book, because at no point does any other character go, but what about Scar, Drahi, and Gavinor? And it really bothered me to have what I felt like was a very slow burn, granted, but it paid off, and then it was just done. It's just, well, we're moving on. We're in Shadesmar now. And I get it. The characters had to keep going. Adolin even says, "Don't think about it. Don't think about Elokar. We have to keep going." but we don't ever really get to see Adolin grieve for his cousin. We don't ever really get to see Kaladin deal with the grief of losing Elhokar. It's kind of just, well, no, there's still a job to do. We still have work to do. I'm going to keep going. And that's great, but I wanted that moment of grief where that slow burn got to finally sizzle over and then just burn out, you know? Instead of just slow burn, explosion, don't worry about the explosion anymore. It's behind us. Just don't think about it. That really bothered me. The other big moment that bothered me, get onto characters here again. Yesna Kholin. I was so glad that Yesna was back. I cannot tell you with words how much I love Yesna. That is a great character. I find her dynamic with Shallan to be so much fun. That is a great dynamic. That dynamic is completely missing from this book because Shallan's a different person than she was with that dynamic. And Yesna and Shallan have a conversation, but it's not in here. That conversation is supposed to be like, you know, hey, we're reconnecting, we're getting back together. But because I don't see it, and because it's never really referenced, I don't feel like they reconnected at all. Instead, it feels like to me, Shallan goes from, I thought you were dead, you were extremely important to me, I cared about you a lot, I thought you were dead, to, oh, you're back and you're in charge of me again, and now I'm just your ward. You were so upset when she died, Shallan. She's alive. You should be overwhelmed. But instead, we don't even get that. It's just like the moment of not getting to see Adolin grieve for Elhokar. We don't get the moment of Shallan getting over her grief for Yesna. So instead, it feels like a slap in the face of just, nah, she's back and she's in charge again, and that makes me mad. Oh, it bothers me so much. This is the last complaint, I promise, and then we'll get into the things I love about this book, because I do love a lot, and we're already almost 20 minutes in. Renarin. Renarin's stuff feels incredibly out of place to me. Renarin just shows up, he acts weird, and then at the end of the book, it's revealed his sprint is one of Odium's. He's been working with the bad guys on accident. He sees these visions. He knows what's going to happen, but he's all messed up because of it, and he thinks he's nuts. Sure, that's an interesting thing, but it feels like a payoff that doesn't really have a setup. It's just like, it's kind of like at the end of this book, when it's, bam, Renarin's also a Surge Binder. It's like, but why? Who's his sprint? We don't ever get to hear about his sprint. Like, at least when Yesna wasn't a POV character, she talked about her sprint in that scene with Shallan. And so it's just like, Renarin, he makes some mentions of Gliss every once in a while. But it's kind of just like, yeah, Renarin's there, and he's helping people. And then just suddenly, bam, Renarin's a traitor. And not really, but he's basically a traitor. It's like, okay. And don't get me wrong, the scene with Yesna and Renarin where she's gonna kill him, that's a really powerful scene. When he realizes that Yesna doesn't want to kill him because she loves him, that's a really powerful scene. It just feels really weird to me how we get there. Because I feel like for that to have been the case, we needed some setup of Renarin was the traitor, you know? We needed some setup of how could Odium possibly know this? And I mean, I guess, yeah, there were some things that were like that, but he had other outlets to get information. But it's just, it feels really strange to me. I don't like it at all. I wish that we had got some POV chapters with Renarin where it could have felt strange, the things he was doing to build up to that moment. And then it would have been a reveal that made me go, oh, that makes so much sense. But instead, it's just a reveal that makes me go, oh, why? I'm excited to see where Renarin goes. But I don't know. It feels really weird to me. It feels like just, hey, we needed something to go on with Renarin here. And again, I know it sounds like I'm just criticizing Brandon Sanderson a lot here. I really enjoy his writing. This is not me just being like, do better, Sanderson. It's me just going, I don't understand. I don't know what the purpose of this was. And maybe future books will reveal it. But right now, it feels extremely out of place. Let's get on to the good, though. Because the best thing about this book is that Meridas Amaram first gets shut down by Yesna, then dies. So already 10 out of 10 book. Meridas Amaram is scum. Um, no, I think this book has a ton of great moments. The stuff with Lopin talking to the ground, the stuff with Rock taking up a weapon, the stuff with Scar, not being able to get his surge binding down, and he doesn't know what to do, and then because he's helping other people, he eventually unlocks it, his squireship. The stuff with Teft and Teft becoming a Radiant. Heck yeah, Teft! Like, oh man, Teft's story in this book is so good. The Bridge 4 still an incredible source of joy for me in these books, and only getting better. Only getting better. Hobber. Not gonna cry. That Hobber. Hold it together. That Hobber moment where Hobber is able to heal his legs. I shouted out in joy. No joke. Full on, just yes! I love Hobber as a character. He's such a tragic character, and to finally be given another chance, it was great. Everything with Kaladin and Sigzil, where Sigzil's trying to convince him to bring on more people, and Kaladin's like, well, I don't know. And then Lynn, and where he has to let women into Bridge 4, and he's not sure what to do about that. All that was great. Kaladin getting pushed down for his misogynistic views about how women can't be Windrunners. Well, why can't they? There were women Radiants. You have a woman Radiant near you. You have two. I love that. I thought Kaladin being just a guy, just a not understanding and having to understand what it's like to run an entire faction of the Knights Radiant. I think all that's really good. Other POV characters in here. Seth and Sword Nimi. Yes. So good. So good. I love that sword so much. I want an entire book about Seth. And when Seth chooses Dalinar, I lost my mind. I was so excited. Then when Seth has to work with Lift, that was great. The characters in this book are so good. And it's what makes me so torn on it, because I really do honestly love this book. It just has some three big things that drag it down for me, unfortunately. I haven't even talked about Azure or the Guard, the Perpendicularity, anymore with Sadius in Dalinar's backstory, the stuff where Odium, reveals that he needs Dalinar to set him free, the stuff with Cultivation, the reveal of the fact that the Parshendi were the actual race that belonged to this world and that humans came here and took it from them. This book is so good. There's so much good. Oh, Vinley just trying to make it, and with her Sprin and trying to keep that Sprin safe and everything that happens there and how the Sprin becomes a part of her. I love it. Vinley's such a good character. I didn't like Vinley in book 1. I'll be honest with you. I did not. But I love Vinley in this book. And the way that Vinley finds out what happened with Eshonai and everything there, and how the rest of the Odium's people just don't seem to care. And that's what really starts to push her away. I love it. I love it. Moash's stuff made sense, but, Moash is kind of just the destructive character that goes, it's not my fault. Because I like that he tells himself it's not his fault, because if he believes that it's his fault, it'd be too much for him. But at the same time, bro, that's totally your fault. You killed Elokar, man. You betrayed Kaladin. You hurt Kaladin. Like, it's totally your fault. Calm down, Moash. Man, Elokar. Elokar really came into his own in Kholinar. He really did a great job. Definitely top 10 characters for me. Elokar Kholin. I loved him by the end. And the moment where he's holding the picture that Shallan drew of him that lets him realize that's what he could be as he goes to say the words. That is a great moment. That is so good. There's somebody else I'm forgetting character-wise that I wanted to talk about, but it's a great book. It's a great book. I have my problems with it, as we talked about, but this is a great book. And I'm very excited for Rhythm of War. If I had to rank them right now, it would be 2, 1, 3. It would be Words of Radiance, Way of Kings, Oathbringer. Just because I do again think that the stuff that drags it down quite a bit. For Taravangian, that's the character I was going to talk about. Taravangian is such a good character. I mean, he's a terrible person. He's vile, but I love him because he honestly believes what he's doing will save his people. It won't save everybody else, but it'll save his people. So he doesn't care about everybody else. He did his best to protect the world. Doesn't matter now. He's going to work with Odium. And it's just like the way that he plays Dalinar constantly, it's incredible. I love him. I love Navani too. Navani Kolen, great character. Navani really comes into her own in this book as well. She was already extremely smart. She was already extremely cool. But this book, she really just takes it to another level. The moment when she finds out about Elokar, and we get that moment where she kind of grieves, and I guess we get a little bit of Adolin grieving there, but not too much. But then she's immediately like, okay, I've done it. I've grieved. It's time to move on. We have work to do. Dalinar's in trouble. Everybody's in trouble. We got to keep going. So good. I really like this book a lot. I don't think it's as good as the previous two, but I think that it's still leagues above a lot of other books. So definitely worth a shot, in my opinion. You should read this book if you've made it through me spoiling it almost completely. There's a lot of stuff I didn't bring up in here. So there's still reveals, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And until next time, I've been Trey. This has been The Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum that Oathbringer to offer.